Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is David Sanger, who is the chief Washington correspondent for the New York Times. He joins us actually from Washington, D.C. via satellite. He's the author of a fascinating book called Confront and Conceal: Obama's Secret Wars and the Surprising Use of American Power. It was just translated into French. We're very happy to have you, David, from Washington.
Great to be with you, Mark.
So the book is really fascinating. It tells about Obama's decision-making, his handling of the Arab Spring, his expansion of the use of drones in places like Pakistan and Yemen. But it is really newsworthy for one thing called Olympic Games, which is a secret cyber war that the Obama administration has been fighting with Iran without most of us knowing. Tell us about it.
Well, Olympic Games, Mark, began in the Bush administration, and it began because everyone was looking for an alternative to bombing the Iranian nuclear sites if they couldn't reach a negotiated solution. And so Israel and the United States combined forces through the National Security Agency and the Pentagon at the U.S. end, and Unit 8200 in Israel, which is their equivalent of the U.S. National Security Agency. And they began to develop code that would get into the controllers, the computers that run the centrifuges in Iran. Now, these centrifuges are these big floor-to-ceiling devices that spin at supersonic speeds. May have the strongest military in the world. And these devices, of course, enrich uranium. And the idea was to get in with a secret code and then have the centrifuges speed up and slow down until they began to destroy themselves. And this worked for a few years. The Iranians had no idea what was causing these problems, thought it was other technical difficulties, until one day in the summer of 2011 when somebody made a mistake and the worm got out and replicated around the world for everybody to see.
The worm known as Stuxnet. So you said this computer worm was successfully introduced and was effective in sabotaging the Iranian nuclear program until it was revealed. But it worked to a certain extent.
It worked, it delayed them, and it even worked after it was revealed. In fact, the book opens with the head of the CIA at the time, Leon Panetta, going down into the Situation Room at the White House and with some aides telling President Obama that the worm had gotten loose, that somebody had made a coding error. The worm had gotten aboard the laptop computer of an Iranian engineer who went home and got on the internet, and it started replicating itself around the globe. The president had to decide whether to shut the program down. And in the end, that summer, summer of 2010, he said, let's keep it going. The Iranians probably don't yet fully understand what's happening to them. And in fact, that's what they did. And a few weeks later, they were able to destroy about 1,000, a little under 1,000 Iranian centrifuges. Now, that said, the Iranians have since recovered. And if you look at their production rates of uranium, it's now pretty steady and rising at a pretty regular pace.
So does that mean that the program is not ongoing, that it was eventually stopped because the Iranians figured it out?
We don't know how much of it is ongoing, Mark. I think there's every reason to believe that there's probably an Olympic Games 2 and an Olympic Games 3. There were certainly some techniques they did not use in the first round that they could well now try to use in subsequent rounds. And much of this is dependent on what facilities they want to target. The attacks that I describe in Confront and Conceal were all against the Natanz nuclear enrichment plant. But of course, since that time, the Iranians have fully stocked up another plant deep underground, very hard to bomb, called Fordo. And presumably there is an effort to figure out how you could get into that one as well, especially if it is impervious to bombing.
So you're describing this as an U.S.-Israeli initiative, despite the fact that we've seen, at least in public, tensions between Washington and Jerusalem over what to do, how to deal with the Iranian nuclear program, with Israel pushing for a military intervention.
You know, Mark, this is one of the fascinating elements of the story because the Israelis have at various times pushed for an intervention and then, as recently as September, said, no, we have until next summer. Olympic Games had two goals about it. One was, of course, to slow the Iranian program. The second goal, though, was to show the Israelis that there was a way to harm the program and set it back without having an overt military strike easily attributable to Israel that could start another war in the Middle East. So partly Olympic Games, the idea among the Americans was to come up with an alternative to what you normally do by bombing or on-the-ground sabotage.
So did this work? There was a lot of speculation that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, wanted an Israeli attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities before the U.S. election. Obviously, this did not happen. Is this a result maybe of this secretive program you've described?
Well, it certainly wasn't a result of the first round of the program that I describe in the book. What we don't know is what's happening now, if anything. And of course, the Iranians are trying to figure that out too. But because the Iranians do not yet have enough of the medium-enriched uranium to produce a single bomb, they diverted some off for use in a medical reactor, it's everyone's sense that there is some time for negotiation. And one of the ways that you get a country to come and sit down seriously at the negotiating table is if they think that they are still subject to further covert or overt attack, and that they would lose the program anyway, so they might as well see what they could get in a negotiation. At least that's the theory under which France, the United States, the other allies are going at this.
There is speculation, actually, that the Obama administration is exploring possible negotiations with Iran, maybe with other allies. Do you think this is serious, or do you think this is yet another way for the Iranians to earn time, as the Israelis keep on saying?
It could be both, Mark. It could be a serious negotiation because the Iranians are hurting more than they've ever hurt before. The sanctions that the Europeans, the United States, the United Nations Security Council have put on Iran are now the most biting ones they've had, both the financial sanctions and, of course, the oil revenue sanctions. But the big question is what's going on in the mind of the supreme leader. And no one knows that. So he may be negotiating to buy time, he may be negotiating to strike a deal, and he may not know why he's negotiating because he may want to see what kind of deal comes to him. I think part of the frustration for Iranian negotiators is they're probably having a hard time reading him as well.
But do you think Obama, we remember when he arrived, he wanted to negotiate with the Iranians, it didn't work. Do you think he's willing to try that another time, or that in the end he thinks sabotage, sanctions, and eventually military actions are the necessary course?
Well, I think he certainly believes that sanctions and sabotage are necessary to bring Iran to the negotiating table. Now, if an agreement can be reached, that's great. If it can't be, he needs to be able to demonstrate to the rest of the European allies and to the rest of the world that he went the extra mile, that he did what George Bush never did on Iraq, which was to establish that they had tried every possible negotiated solution. Because otherwise, if there is an attack on Iran, the entire coalition would risk falling apart.
Can you just tell us about the relationship between Obama and Netanyahu? There's been a lot of speculation that it's been very bad. They're now obviously interacting again because of the Gaza crisis. What do you know of it?
Well, the relationship was very bad, and they went through 4 really difficult years in which Netanyahu and Obama didn't trust each other. They battled over settlements. They battled over Iran strategy. The prime minister publicly lectured the president during a visit to the United States. The president has never gone to Israel as president. So it's been a very tough relationship. And it was made tougher during the political campaign by the fact that it was pretty obvious that Prime Minister Netanyahu was rooting for Mitt Romney, his old friend and fellow consultant in Boston 20 years ago. But now Gaza has come along, and that has given a chance for both the president and the prime minister to remake this relationship, with both of them realizing that, like it or not, they're stuck with each other for the next few years.
Last question. You mentioned the use of drones by Barack Obama during his first mandate. I mean, is this really striking? And could we see drones used in another place? There's a lot of talk right now in France about coming war in Mali, in the Sahel region. And do you think this is really something new with Obama, that he's willing to fight from afar?
You know, a big theme of Confront and Conceal is that this has been a very surprising presidency, and it's been surprising because the president has been far more willing to use force than anybody had expected if you listened to him in 2008, and certainly more than most Europeans expected when they heard him talk about engagement. But when you think about it, he took the drone program. He has done nearly 6 times as many drone strikes over Pakistan as President Bush did during President Bush's entire presidency. He has made greater use of cyber. And of course, he's made great use of special forces, not just the night that Osama bin Laden was killed, but these consistent night raids. This is the essence of the light footprint strategy that President Obama has laid out. Now, the question is, has it run its course? We haven't seen the president use it in Syria. He hasn't wanted to get involved there. Mali, as you mentioned, is going to be a very interesting test case and maybe a place where drones could be useful. Certainly the president has shown no compunctions, no hesitation to go use these remote control forms of warfare.
David Sanger, thank you very much for enlightening us on the secretive nature of Barack Obama. Your book has been really a pleasure to read, and it's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you very much, and stay here on France 24 for more news.